Sports with Sean Caravillas.
The spotlight will be on Mercedes, Ferrari and Red Bull as Formula One returns to its spiritual home at Silverstone for the British Grand Prix. Here's BBC 5 Live.
This is 5 Live Sport.
5 Live Formula One.
To win your home Grand Prix in front of your countrymen, when we did a lap of honour, to see people spilling onto the circuit to express their joy, even to this day, I'll get people coming up to me and saying, I was there in 1981.
It's wonderful. It's absolutely amazing. I came here as a young boy. I camped here. It was something aspirational. To imagine that I could actually race a Formula One car, never mind have the chance to win. It's very difficult to put into words. Just the overwhelming feeling of satisfaction in winning your home race.
Even though you're racing and concentrating hard, you obviously become very aware of the people, and they were getting quite excited. And it was, from my point of view, the greatest day, I suppose, of my racing career. Really.
I mean, just unbelievable memories and great moments of celebration. It was wonderful for the fans and certainly for me and the team.
It was almost better than winning the World Championship. It's your home Grand Prix. It's the Grand Prix that you dream of winning. Silverstone is one of the greatest sporting moments of the year for the UK, and we need to make sure we keep it.
The crowd in the grandstands are on their feet as for the third year in a row, Lewis Hamilton comes out of the final corner to win the British Grand Prix at Silverstone.
Hamilton, Mansell, Moss, Coulthard and Watson, just 5 of the 12 British drivers to have won the British Grand Prix. Yes, we are here at Silverstone. It's a little bit like, if you can imagine, going to Glastonbury, just without the bands. Well, some bands are here this weekend, but they're probably not quite as headline. The weather, yes, it will be rainy. Yes, there are people in tents and campsites, and maybe it ends up a little bit boggy. Jack Nicholls is looking at me questioningly. Thousands and thousands of people will pour in to this circuit this weekend to enjoy what is a festival of Formula One. Is that not right, Jack Nicholls?
That is absolutely correct. I did Glastonbury this year, and this is a little bit different, so it feels a little bit different to me, so maybe I did everything wrong. I did do Glastonbury wrong, but anyway, that's a whole different story. Yep, it's a wonderful festival, a wonderful celebration of motorsport, and it's fantastic to have it here, and on this sort of Thursday setup day when everything's being put together, it's fantastic to come here and feel the buzz. You know, you really do feel a buzz, and I didn't really feel it up to this week. It was because you're straight off the back of Austria, it's all a bit all over the place. But then as you're driving up the M1, you go, oh, it's the British Grand Prix.
You certainly do. And as we said, there are already a lot of fans here this weekend. The grandstands are in full. Practice has been happening. Valtteri Bottas in his black jacket and baseball cap just walks past us. A stark contrast to last week in the sunshine and sweltering heat of Austria. We've already had a little bit of rain. Andrew Benson, Tom Clarkson, they're also here. A busy week in the world of Formula One. Andrew Benson is the chief F1 writer for the BBC. You haven't stopped, have you?
No, there's been an awful lot going on. There was the Austrian Grand Prix, but not a bad weekend for Lewis Hamilton. Then the Robert Kubica testing in Paul Ricard for Renault. The London Live event on Wednesday. On Tuesday, the day before that, Silverstone announced that they'd taken their option to end the contract after 2019 for the British Grand Prix. And now here we are with Hamilton this afternoon saying this is a must-win weekend. And another engine penalty for Fernando Alonso. I nearly forgot.
Another one, yes, as you said. So coming up on the menu for tonight, we have Lewis Hamilton, you just spoke about him there, and Jolyon Palmer, the two Brits taking on this historic and iconic British racing track. And one of the iconic British teams in Formula One, Williams, is celebrating a big anniversary. They have a movie out as well, I believe. Jack, no, you didn't go and see that, did you? You were going to. Yeah. Okay. Well, Paddy Lowe, who's one of the big bosses behind Williams now, moved across from Mercedes. He's going to be speaking to us as well. Now, as I said, the Formula One circus is here at Silverstone ahead of Sunday's British Grand Prix, but the long-term future of the race is in doubt. The track's owners, the British Racing Drivers Club, have triggered a release clause from their current contract with Formula One owners Liberty Media, effectively cancelling the British Grand Prix after 2019. So let's hear from the new boss of Formula One, Chase Carey, on the Silverstone situation.
The foundation of this sport is in Western Europe. I think foundations, particularly a sport with a history like ours, is incredibly important, and we need to make sure we're continuing to build on the foundation. Yes, there are growth opportunities in places like China and the US, but build on those new growth opportunities, you build on them on top of the foundation. So the foundation has to be strong. Those tracks are a big part of it. Silverstone, to be specific, we actually have a race in place through 2019, so you're talking 3 years. There's got to be a little bit of a reality check of the time frame we're dealing with here. Our goal would be to have a race at Silverstone. We are talking to them. We've got a lot of time to talk to them and hopefully find a path forward. We don't today have a path forward, but we feel there's time to try and see what options there are and what opportunities there are. It is our goal to have a race in the UK. I mean, I think it's we think it's critically important. The UK, is one of the true. When I talk about foundation, within the foundation, the UK is clearly a foundation second to none. So, we're certainly determined to have a race in the UK.
Are there other options on the table at the moment?
Yeah, I don't want to get too far into there. There's interest from others. There's certainly interest from other places, other UK options that certainly would have appeal to it. In many ways, I don't want to get too far into it. This sport in the past has been a sport that I find likes to talk first and then act second, and I'm not sure that's always healthy. Like in life, I've usually tried to get things done and then talk publicly about why we did what we did. So negotiating in public or posturing in public is really not a practice I'm a great fan of. So I think the conversation, whether it's the conversations with Silverstone or the conversations with others that would represent other UK options, are better had privately. We want these to be long-term partnerships. And I think the best way to get there is to develop a level of trust and understanding and engagement with each other. It needs to make sense to us, but we recognize there are issues we need to deal with any of the parties that we're in talks with. But, we are very much determined to have a race, in the UK, and I think our priority would be to try to find a solution with Silverstone.
So that's F1 boss Chase Carey, who's new to the mix. Well, he's been around for 6 months now, having taken over from Bernie Ecclestone and his group running the show. Listening across to that was Stuart Pringle from Silverstone. And Stuart, how hard is it to listen to that sort of response from Chase Carey and know that this release clause has been triggered and after 2019 at the moment there will be no Silverstone Grand Prix?
Hello, Jenny. I think actually it's very easy to listen to that. I think it's extremely positive. The things that Chase is saying there are things that I feel very strongly as well. We absolutely want a Grand Prix in the United Kingdom, and we very much want to host it here at Silverstone. You won't find anybody in the world of motorsport more enthusiastic about motor racing than the British Racing Drivers Club, the owners of Silverstone here, and those of us charged with running the circuit for them. We're batty about this. We just love running this, but we had to draw a line under the losses we have to draw a line under the losses that we're currently sustaining under the current contract. So, it was with a really heavy heart that we took the action that we did, but it shouldn't be seen as the end. We are actually huge fans of Liberty. We think they're a wonderful breath of fresh air, and they share their vision is aligned very much with our vision. So, as Chase said, there's 2018, 2019 to run. I think by the time we've got to know each other and knowing what a good job we do, this is my 11th Grand Prix here, and I know that we're pretty good at putting these things on. I think they're going to be quite impressed with the show this weekend, and I'd like to think that we can meet Chase and his aspirations to hold a race here at Silverstone and make him comfortable with that.
Andrew Benson, I feel like you would like to get in on this conversation.
Yeah, there's so many questions to ask about this situation, aren't there? But first of all, Stuart, obviously you've known Liberty now for 6 or 7 months, and they've known that this was coming, I think, for that period of time, because it was telegraphed pretty well by Silverstone from sometime in the sort of autumn last year, if I remember rightly. Why have you not been able to come to an agreement on this already, given that they knew that this was going to happen and that everyone was going to end up in this very uncomfortable situation?
Well, I'm not sure that it is that uncomfortable. We've got another 2 years to run under this contract, and I don't know, perhaps it's, like when you've got to get your homework done, you need a proper deadline before you actually sit down to do it, and 2019's a long way away, so I wouldn't say it's particularly uncomfortable. We're pretty sanguine about it. Honestly, we've got a great dialogue with these guys. We genuinely respect what they're doing, and we're getting those messages back as well from them. So, I don't think, Andrew, with the greatest respect to your journalistic note, suppose you should read too much into this. Of course, we want certainty. We'd all like certainty, but all contracts have an end, and this one had a window where we had to make a decision. And actually, I'm in the business of dealing with facts. I've seen too many things at Silverstone here where we've hoped things might work out and things might get right, and actually they haven't. And we don't have the benefit of a really, really substantial balance sheet to be able to roll the dice. We've got to deal with the facts and the certainty. So actually that might cause us to take what some would consider to be a prudent course of action, but that's fine, we've got time to sort this out.
I think people can see why you would have had to activate the clause. The contract was for £12 million, if I'm right, starting back in 2010, but it had a 5% escalator, so it's going up quite a significant amount of money every year. Everyone can see why there are losses involved, but how big a risk is this? Because we had this event yesterday in London, the London Mayor's talking about being open to having a London Grand Prix. Obviously there are practical issues surrounding that, but and Liberty are looking at big events in big cities in the US and have talked about being interested in that in the UK as well. Isn't there a risk that they'll find a way of doing a race in London and you'll be left out in the cold?
Yes, of course, very much so. We're completely realistic about that. We recognise that one of the possible outcomes of our course of action is that we won't have a Grand Prix here at Silverstone, and that would be a huge shame. We hosted the first round of the Formula One World Championship in 1950. We've been the exclusive home in Great Britain since 1987. We've hosted some of the greatest battles here in the sport, and we do so with great pride. The circuit is owned by a group of racing drivers, and operationally, we're as good as they get on the calendar. So yeah, that would be a massive disappointment. However, we also can't put the whole of Silverstone at risk for the sake of one race, and that is the equation that we had to look at, and we had to make a decision. And perhaps Liberty, as Jenny said, Chase has been the boss for 6 months. It's just unfortunate that the timing of this contract, which was set many years ago, gave us this window, which happened to come up during the first year of Liberty's ownership. If they'd had another 2 or 3 years to see us in action, and we'd had a chance to see whether their things were going to come to fruition, perhaps it might have been different. But we've got that now. Okay, we've made our decision, and we're comfortable with that. And given the confidence that we have actually in their plans, because they're very much aligned with ours, we think that they will settle on Silverstone as a natural home, and it's hugely encouraging. Don't forget the other thing that Chase said right from the outset is that the classic European races are central to what they're trying to build here. Well, they don't come much more classic and much more European than Silverstone, do they? So, let's continue to focus on doing a good job here, and hopefully it'll work itself out.
Tom Clarkson is also here alongside us this evening for 5 Live F1.
Stuart, the reason we're in this situation is down to money. So do you have a figure in your head as to what you think you're prepared to pay Liberty to stage the British Grand Prix?
Well, I do, Tom, and that's exactly where it's going to stay. Because actually, Chase makes a very, very good point. It doesn't serve either party, or frankly, the sport, with the possible exception of you news hounds. It doesn't serve anybody for us to talk about figures and negotiate in public. I have no desire to do that. I'm completely at one with him on that one. So, be assured, we have an ongoing dialogue. We will talk about things, and if there's a way to sort this out, we will do.
So in this ongoing dialogue that you talk about, and everybody's on the same page, were you then surprised when the Formula One group came out on Tuesday evening and were quite harsh maybe in their critique of Silverstone, saying we should be celebrating this week and not just posturing and that sort of thing? Were you surprised, considering how open your dialogue is?
I didn't think that anything that came out was particularly aggressive or offensive. I thought it was all pretty fair. I mean, they're being pushed for comments, and so
you would agree you are posturing?
Well, I wouldn't agree with the use of that word. No, I would say that there is a moment in time in a contract that is there. So, listen. I actually agree also. It's amazing how much we are aligned on Jack. I'm not trying to sort of, try and avoid your questions too much, but the reality is that we have got what I believe to be the greatest Formula One race of the calendar coming up this weekend. I too want to keep the focus on the racing and the race meeting. We will have well over 300,000 people coming through the gates here at Silverstone, the biggest weekend ticketed sporting event in the UK annually. The atmosphere will be second to none. We've got a British driver, a 3-time world champion, absolutely on a charge. He's raised the stakes enormously, saying he's got to win it. There's a lot of people here who are desperate for him to do it. And, you know, I just think it is probably time, with the greatest respect, to park Tuesday's news, which came out of the Daytona contract, and leave it in last week and focus on this weekend and the sport.
I think we will all echo that sentiment now, because there is only so much you can talk about the break clause of a contract without it becoming a little bit tiresome. We hope, for everybody's sake, here anyway, that Silverstone can remain the home of the British Grand Prix. I know a lot of drivers have spoken about their want for it. Has Lewis Hamilton had a chat at all about the fact that he'd like it to remain here?
Actually, he has. Lewis has been extremely supportive, and you know, he thrives on it, doesn't he? He absolutely thrives on the atmosphere here, and he's the last person that would want to go. So I know that we can count on his support. We are very much in touch on that, yeah.
Lovely. Stuart Pringle, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about Silverstone and what happens next. We're going to let you go. I know it's a busy weekend for you. We have plenty to do. Right, Jack, we've spoken now about Silverstone quite lengthily, but just tell us a little bit about what people can look forward to this weekend when it comes to Silverstone. Why is it so iconic? Why do the drivers love it so much?
I think they really love the break clause and all the conversations surrounding that. But no, they love it because it's a fast, flowing circuit. They've made a few changes recently to improve overtaking as well that has genuinely helped, in all honesty. It's just got that feeling of history to it. It's the same when you go to Monza. You know, they've been holding Grand Prix here since 1948, I think was the first Grand Prix at Silverstone, and the first World Championship, Formula One World Championship event ever was here in 1950, so it's just a place steeped in history. It's a really fast racetrack, really demanding on the drivers. It's brilliant.
Well, one man that certainly likes it here is Lewis Hamilton. He's won the last 3 races, looking to make it 4 this weekend, and despite not turning up at that London event yesterday and jet setting, I think, over to Greece and back to party instead, he says he loves his lifestyle.
I am travelling a lot, and it's obviously through decision. It's a choice I take. I just feel, well, I want to be everywhere at the same time. I just have this desire to do anything I can. Just feel like this is a time to build and to grow and to utilise every second that I have in order to take over the world. That's the takeover. That's working towards being great.
What is it that drives that sense of purpose and dedication in you? Because that doesn't, I mean, you've always been driven but towards F1, and now that seems to have branched out into a much wider life.
Well, I think the same that it is for all of us. I think there's a lot of us who are grateful for everything we have, but we always want more. You know, I got to Formula One, which was my goal, my dream, and then other things happen. You wake up and you have another dream about something. You're like, oh wow, that would be great. I want that now. How can I have that as well? How can I do that as well? How can I divide myself that it doesn't take away from the 100% I give to there? Time is so limited for us all, and that we generally don't. None of us think about how many days we have left on this earth, really, do we? If you sit at home and watch TV all day and stay in bed, you kind of think that's a nice thing, but it's actually a bit of a waste because there's so much you could do. But then that's an opinion-driven thing for me. I want to learn as much as I can every day. I want to achieve as much as I can. By the time my time is up here, I just want to have experienced as much as I could.
Do you ever worry about burning yourself out? Do you need to recharge your batteries ever and just stop?
Well, I'm only human, so of course I do, but it's very easy to recharge for me. I find it super, super easy.
What do you do to recharge then?
It's different each time, but I think, sometimes I hit a wall. Like a couple of weeks ago, before Austria, actually, I had the week of training to prepare the best ever, that people would say, and then got to the UK. I was at the factory, and one night I just got home, I hit a wall, passed out at 8 o'clock, woke up, and I don't really sleep, massive hours. 5 hours is kind of a lot for me. So I slept from 8 o'clock till like 1 a.m. and then 1 a.m. till 6, I think it was, before I went back to work again. And that's recovery for me. Or going home and having home cooked food and just sitting with the kids and just watching them cause havoc and causing havoc with them. You know, I love going to Hyde Park and I get my family to come, we all get together and we have a picnic. That's recharging for me. Or when I do my music, I find that's I love being around musicians, being around my friends who just make me. I got one, my Uncle Terry, it just makes me laugh all day, every day, and not overthinking things too much. You know, not letting things drag you down. I very rarely ever let anything drag me down.
What about love? When it comes to love, you talk about kids a lot. In the past, you talked about family relationship and how important that is. In the future, would you hope to have kids? Would you hope to have that stability of somebody to love?
The stability thing, I don't feel like I need. I don't feel like I need someone to give me stability. I feel like we can all do that ourselves. Do I look forward to one day having a family and stuff? Absolutely, I love that. But you will be team players. You know, you're a team, and I guess you come with your stability, but you both hopefully that person is very stable within themselves, so they're not supporting. I don't know. I just don't feel like I need someone to give me stability, and I never want to have to rely on someone in order to do that. But I do love kids, and there will be a time and a place. I hope I live to see it. Which, I mean, I love kids. Right now I'm enjoying my closest friends having kids. So one of my best friends just had a girl just a couple weeks ago. Gonna get to meet her tonight. My Mark, who I've been one of my best friends for 16 years, he just had a baby, so I'm godfather and I love spending time with him. They call me the baby whisperer because he sleeps a lot with me, so or he doesn't cry when I'm generally holding him. So I love kids, so not just babies. I just love kids. So of course I look forward to that day, and that's going to be like Christmas for me.
And what about the future? Lots of people always talk about what you want to do next, and you're massively into your music. You've got, as you say, a close circle of friends, but a life after F1, can you even imagine it? Because you've just always been here.
I feel like the life after is the best part to come. Really, I do. Like where I decide where I'm going to live, and you settle down and you create a social regime that you have with friends. You work out Wednesday and Friday and together, and you do your game night and all those things you do. I don't know, I'm super excited about that stuff, but I think I'll always want to be challenged by things. So, but I'll probably have that more so in the location that I'm living, rather than living on a plane and in hotels.
Do you see that day coming sooner rather than later? I mean, you've been in F1 for a long time now, and if you could win the championship this year, would you be tempted to just walk away?
It's not something I'm considering at the moment, but it could be any time. I don't feel I have to do anything. If I continue to love racing, I can continue to drive, which I do. At some point, I think I'll just know in my heart, I'm sure it'll just come to me, and I'll be like, you know what, that's it. And I don't feel like I don't like to look at it as walking away. I just like to think of it as a closing of a chapter, a great, the most amazing chapter in my life that's actually given me life, giving me the wonderful opportunities that lay ahead of me, of which I'm very grateful for, and then go on to do other beautiful things.
So that's Lewis Hamilton talking to me a little earlier on. Andrew, there is always a lot of speculation about his future, about how long he'll stay in the sport, and it doesn't, I suppose, surprise you to hear that he probably will just one day turn around and go, yeah, enough's enough.
Well, I'm sure he will, like Nico Rosberg did actually at the end of last season. He's got a contract till the end of next year, and I think, it's obviously true that Lewis loves doing other things. He likes partying, he likes going off, playing on his jet skis, he loves skiing in the winter at his place in Colorado, he loves his music, as he says. He obviously likes the celebrity lifestyle, which is, after all, driven by Formula One. But fundamentally, he's a racing driver who loves racing driving. And I think he's only 32. I'd be amazed if he stopped Formula One within the next year or so. Absolutely amazed, because I think if he did, he'd find himself thinking, well, yeah, I do love all this other stuff, but I don't love it as much as I love the other bit that I've just given up. So I don't think he will, not in the near future.
And I remember him being very negative about Nico Rosberg giving up at the end of last year, saying lost respect for him and things like that. So I think to walk away mid-contract would be very surprising.
What I find amazing is you can have, and Andrew wrote a great piece about it actually on the BBC Sport website the other day, which I don't often say about Andrew's pieces, but Lewis will come and he'll be grumpy as anything after Austria, like super grumpy. Then he doesn't turn up to the London Live thing yesterday, the only one of the drivers not to do so, and he gets quite a lot of stick, so that caused a bit of kerfuffle here, a lot of questions about that in the press conference. But then an hour later he'll open up and talk about all sorts of totally personal random things, and that's the strange thing about him. He doesn't have this, Dan Ricciardo, you know what you're going to get every time you interview him. Apart from that one time in Monaco where he lost the victory, you get the same Daniel Ricciardo. Hamilton's different every single time.
And is that what intrigues people about it? Is it what keeps people, buying merchandise? What keeps people finding out about him and wanting to know more about him? Because he's not predictable, and he is one of the biggest personalities in British sport, let alone in motorsport.
He wears his heart on his sleeve. This is what the piece that Jack was talking about. This is what I was trying to get across in that he can't not show himself to people, whatever mood he's in, and that spontaneity that he has reflects in his driving as well, and what makes him such a compelling driver as well as a person to observe. There's never not something to write about Lewis Hamilton, I think, is a simple way to sum it up.
Still to come, Jolyon Palmer, Paddy Lowe, the man at Williams now, who's in charge of all the technical aspects of things, and we will have a good old chat about the title battle. I'm Jenny Gow. I'll be in the pit lane for this weekend. Alongside me is Jack Nicholls, our commentator, and Tom Clarkson, who will be joining him in the commentary box, and Andrew Benson, our chief Formula One writer for the BBC. And we've come to the front of the garages now, from the paddock into the pit lane, and there are a sea of people here. I just want to see if I can get them all to give us a bit of a shout. Are there some Lewis Hamilton fans here? Yeah, just a couple of them. Are you all having a good time? As a lovely Union flag with Hammer Time on it is flown around. Jack?
The problem with that is all the people up the far end of the queue have just gone, oh, what's happening? Someone famous is here. And then it's Jenny Gow.
Just us. Sorry, guys. So disappointing, I know. So, British Grand Prix takes place this Sunday, and I think our only hope of a big British winner in sport this weekend, now Conta and Murray are out of Wimbledon, is Lewis Hamilton. So we should talk about his championship challenge, because Jack Nicholls, it's not going quite to plan, is it, for Hamilton?
No. 20 points behind Sebastian Vettel at the top of the championship, only 15 points ahead of his teammate Valtteri Bottas. So, it certainly hasn't been an ideal couple of races for Lewis Hamilton. And I think it was always going to be tough in Austria last time out, with a 5-place grid penalty for a gearbox change. But he didn't get it hooked up in qualifying either. And I feel personally that of the 9 Grand Prix we've had so far this season, we've had a higher percentage of Hamilton not really hooking it up like we know he can compared to the last few years.
But he does hook it up when his back's against the wall. That's what we've seen from him. At end of last year, he was absolutely mighty. And
how much further against the wall does his back need to be? He's 20 points behind Sebastian Vettel.
Yeah, but he's still thinking, I've got 10 races left, 11 races left, including this weekend. And I think we're going to see him wake up. And I think that's maybe one of the reasons he didn't go to the fan thing in London last night, was he quite likes to cause a little bit of aggro and be up against it. And then if he wins on Sunday, he'll get a standing ovation and everyone will love him.
The thing that dominated the championship chat last year was these reliability issues that Hamilton faced that Rosberg didn't. Rosberg became the champion, Hamilton didn't. And Andrew, this has got those sort of the start of that again, hasn't it? We had the headrest issue when we were in Baku. We had the 5-place grid penalty for the gearbox last time out as well. Is reliability once again going to be one of the factors that comes into this championship?
Well, he's finished all the races for a start, which was not the case last year, and the reliability's only affected him so far this year with the gearbox penalty in Austria. The other issues he's had have been related to either him or a problem with the car that he wasn't able to get around that Valtteri Bottas, his teammate, was, in the case of Russia and Monaco, for example. So Jack's right. I mean, you take it as an average, 3, and his qualifying in Austria wasn't as good as it could have been, although you could argue there were mitigating circumstances. So that's 3 race weekends out of 9 where he's not been on top form, and against a rival as strong as Sebastian Vettel and Ferrari this year, I don't think he can get away. He certainly can't get away with that ratio for the rest of the season. He might be able to get away with that ratio for the first time races if he stops it now.
He has been away. He wanted to go and sort of regather himself, not do the event in London. He went across to Mykonos. He's had a nice time on a boat, just relaxing and taking a bit of time for him, because he sees this championship as something that he wants to be fully focused on, and didn't need the distraction of going into London and meeting all of his fans who adore him, and felt very disappointed by it. However, Valtteri Bottas, his teammate, was there for Mercedes, and who here in the team thinks that this could be a 3-horse race now with Valtteri Bottas? Oh, all of you are shaking your head as if to say no. Tom, would you like to offer us a little more than just a shake of the head for radio?
Just quite simply, I don't think Bottas is a good a driver as Hamilton, and I think when Hamilton does get it hooked up, he will leave him standing. And I think this weekend at Silverstone, Hamilton is brilliant at Silverstone. This track is made for him, and I think he should dominate, barring any technical issues. And I think this could see him start to get some momentum and get on his way again.
I think we sometimes forget just how good Lewis Hamilton is, and I know, yes, we're the BBC, and we focus a lot on Hamilton, but he actually is really, really good at driving racing cars, and Valtteri Bottas is excellent. There's no doubt about it. And Bottas, if Hamilton wasn't in the car, would be a championship contender. But I just feel alongside Hamilton, he's going to struggle.
We are just about to get run over by Fernando Alonso's McLaren. It's coming down the pit lane as they bring it back from scrutineering. On a Thursday, all the cars get put back together from wherever they have been. They go up to
fast, actually, isn't it?
It's going faster than usual, yes. Being pushed by several very large mechanics. So it goes up to scrutineering, gets checked that all is okay, and then gets pushed back down into the garage. They put covers on it for the night, a little bit like a very large hairnet, and then all the mechanics and engineers get to go home, which is very nice for them. Just in front of Valtteri Bottas's car, which is kind of still a little bit in bits. Let me just look on the other side to see how Lewis Hamilton's. So they've just got the backs are slightly exposed, so you can see engines and gearboxes and all that paraphernalia, and there's still plenty of people to the right hand side of me here at Silverstone with flags, taking lots of pictures of everything and wanting to get involved with Formula One as much as they possibly can. Now, talking about Valtteri Bottas, of course this is his first season with Mercedes. Prior to that, he was with Williams Racing. It's almost like they did a bit of a swap. Valtteri Bottas came from Williams to Mercedes, and in the meantime, one of the big technical bosses, Paddy Lowe, went from Mercedes down to Williams. They're celebrating their 40th year in Formula One, so we thought we'd sit down with the man behind the mechanics of Williams and find out a little bit more about Paddy Lowe. So I asked him how he's found that switch.
The thing about Formula One is it's pretty much the same game everywhere you go. We have the same challenges. There may be subtle differences to how they're approached, but the game itself is very familiar. In one way, it's frustrating to be sort of celebrating 2 points when you'd rather celebrate a real win, but everything's relative. It's remarkable how quickly you can switch into the spirit of competition relative to where you are. You've got to enjoy that process and make the best of it. If you just sat and said, I'm not winning, so the world's all terrible, then I think it would be difficult to get out of bed in the morning ultimately. The thing I really enjoy is when a purple sector pops up in qualifying. Actually, that is a more rewarding moment than a checkered flag, because that's the point at which, as an engineer, you realise that you've you've created a car and a fantastic driver has wrung its neck, and those purples pop up on the timing monitor. So I've got sort of purple addiction, and it's now ingrained.
Obviously, when it comes to technical minds, you have one of the best in the paddock, so maybe you can help people at home to try and understand this battle between Mercedes and Ferrari this year, because it's quite a unique situation. We haven't had a battle at the front for a while. So what's going on up there? Why is the Mercedes so tricky to handle?
You know, every track is different and has different challenges, and the Mercedes was in the fortunate position of being reasonably dominant on performance for most of the last 3 seasons. Even at those more difficult specific tracks, you can make sure you're performing at the best that car is capable of. You can still have enough to win the race. I think now where the inherent performance of 2 teams at the front is about the same, those circuit to circuit and event to event differences just become far more obvious. People assume that if you've got a quick car you can just turn up and roll it out of the garage and win the race. It is never that easy, and believe me, it was never that easy in the last years that I was at Mercedes.
It's difficult for Williams now, isn't it, to compete with the likes of Ferrari, Mercedes, Red Bull. It's a very different company. So what do you think has to happen in the future for Williams to not just survive but to flourish and be like it was, a championship winning outfit, or are those days gone forever now?
Yeah, we need to do the best we can with what we've got. That's a given. But it's no secret, I'm not the only one saying it, that one of the problems in the sport is the disparity in payments. This was never the case in the past. Ferrari have always had a special treatment and people accepted that more or less, but it's now extended to a bigger group that have effectively become the rich of the sport versus the rest of us. Our new owners recognise that, and I believe it's very high on their list to see greater parity. It's so extreme at the moment that it is difficult to envisage sustained success at the very top and winning championships when you've got that kind of structural difference in the financing. So it actually generates an unstable system where we will just effectively split the grid, and that's emerged stronger and stronger over the last 2, 3, 4 years. So it does have to be corrected.
So Paddy Lowe, they're talking about the correction that needs to happen within Formula One to get some parity between the teams. And as we're stood here outside, Mercedes and Red Bull, who have all the money that they could want to throw at it, Andrew, is there a danger that Formula One will become a 2-tier system? Is it already there?
It's already a 2-tier system, but I think it's hard to remember a time when it wasn't. I mean, you look back through history, the years where there were 3 teams competing for the championship were very few and far between. Even in the 70s, when everyone had the same engine except Ferrari, there was still only 2 or 3 teams or 1 or 2 teams competing for the championship. It's just the nature of the beast. If you have teams making their own cars and teams being able to pick drivers, some of the drivers being better than the other drivers, and the better drivers get the better cars, you're always going to have 2 or 3, 1 or 2 teams at the top. That's the way it goes, and it hasn't stopped the popularity of Formula One from becoming a huge global phenomenon over the last 50 years, so I'm not sure that it's a problem.
More than 20 teams, I think, have gone bust or disappeared from Formula One since 1990 or something like that. So it's there is a high turnover in motorsport. I think things could be done better. I certainly believe that whilst it shouldn't be a sort of totally everyone gets the same money every year, I think you should have some reward for being first, for being second, for being third in the championship. But I think it could be evened out a lot more than it is. So whilst I agree with it in principle, it could be a little bit smoother.
I love the way Paddy's now saying we need to even out the spread of money. Last year, I don't think he was saying that last year, but it isn't. Everyone's got a vested interest in Formula One, and that is actually Formula One's biggest problem when it comes to coming up with new rules and payment schemes and things like that.
I feel like I need to say that sometimes money doesn't matter, does it? Because you can get a rogue result maybe with a team that hasn't got a lot of money that do really well, like a Force India, who survive on a minuscule amount of money in comparison to the likes of Mercedes or Ferrari. And then you've got a Goliath of Formula One like McLaren Honda, who have a fair amount of money behind them but still can't buy themselves a point even if they tried to. So maybe money isn't everything in Formula One.
It's not everything.
And Andrew, they also have one of the best drivers on the grid with Fernando Alonso.
It's not everything money, but if you have everything else lined up, the chassis and the engine and the driver, then money does make a difference. And Jack's absolutely right. While it's not a problem having one or two teams only competing for the championship, it is a problem having a performance spread and a financial spread as big as Formula One has at the moment. That does need to be sorted out. It does need to be more equitable. And I think, yes, you get Force India springing a surprise every now and again, but that surprise is like a rostrum, perhaps, but that's not what people want to see. Sport thrives on uncertainty, and while there's more uncertainty this year because it's Mercedes or Ferrari, you're never going to get a Force India or a Williams or a Renault winning the race, and that's what Formula One needs from time to time.
Andrew, I think the issue at the heart of the problem are these historic payments that have been given to Ferrari, because I think it's a fact that if Force India won the World Championship and Ferrari finished last, Ferrari would still earn more money than Force India for winning the championship. So I think that is the basis for all the problems. Ferrari are going to not want to receive less money, and then where do you go from there?
Why was it more unpredictable in the past then, Andrew? So like in the early 90s, why isn't it as random now as it used to be?
Technology, computers, they don't get things as wrong as they used to. They can get the cars prepared more, but anyway.
I don't remember it being that random when Williams were dominating in the 90s.
There we go, you've been told. Right, we're just going to walk away from Mercedes and their lovely music in the background as the hundreds of people in the pit lane filter out of here and back to their campsites, which are slightly soggier than they were earlier on. Susie P, flying high for Lewis, is one of the posters and flags that's draped on the stands. And there's lots of supporters for all sorts of people here. Even some Jenson Button fans still here, but he is here this weekend as his support role. And the other Brit, we should talk about him as well, Jolyon Palmer in the Renault. He's verging on getting a point. He's had, I think, 3 11th place finishes in the last 4 races. So what can he do around this, his home circuit? It's often said that you can extract a little bit more from Silverstone. Well, he must be looking forward to this weekend, surely.
It is. This is a cool one. It's one that I earmark at the start of the year, and now we're here. It's a lot of support. It's a great track. Looking forward to cracking on with it.
What makes it such a great track?
There's a lot of fast corners, which is what really challenges us. It's where you've got to have a lot of commitment, a lot of bravery, and where we pick the most G, where you can really feel the performance of a Formula One car. So a bit of overtaking places as well now, which is nice. All in all, just I think it's quite a fast lap, and you have to be quite aggressive and just get on with it, really.
Jolyon, we've seen a few spits and spots of rain. I mean, as we tend to do here at Silverstone, could that be quite a nice thing to throw into the mix? Maybe wet qualifying?
I'll find out really tomorrow. It depends. Always when you're doing well, you don't want it to rain, and when you're not, then you do want it to rain. So it depends on the performance of the car. I don't mind either way, to be honest. At the moment, I think it's the classic British weather. I mean, last year was the exact classic British weather. It was dry all weekend. We got to the grid and it absolutely chucked it down. So that's sort of told me, if my previous 26 years in England didn't tell me, that anything can happen here.
You still live in England, don't you? Have you not felt the urge to do what almost every other person on the grid's done and just pick up all your life and go over to Monaco?
No, I love it here. It's what a great country. All my friends and family are here, and it's nice. I'm near the factory. I live in London now, so there's a lot to do. I'm just enjoying UK.
You're very close to getting into the points. A few 11th places, but how do you get that little last leap and get those points on the board?
100,000 cheering Brits, that's how I do it. It's going to happen this weekend, I'm sure. I think it's been 3 races in a row I've finished in 11th. Well, Baku was in between, which I didn't really participate in. So
we've deleted that from our minds. It's absolutely fine.
Yeah, that was not a strong weekend, but all the other ones, I mean, the last 3 have been 11th and right on the tail of 10th. So frustratingly close, especially Austria. I think for like 50 laps I was just running in 11th. I was like just waiting for someone to drop out, and it never happened. Chasing down Lance Stroll for 50 laps, and I couldn't overtake him. So it was frustrating, but the performance is getting there. So Austria was very close, and I think, like I said, 100,000 cheering Brits. I know the track very well. Really enjoyed driving it, so I'm sure this can be the weekend.
How do you, since for quite a while there's been sort of questions about your future and speculation and all of that kind of thing going around. I know when I get insults on Twitter, which is pretty often, it almost makes me cry, it always hurts you, No, I know, but you try and ignore it, but you just sort of can't. Are you able to sort of shut all that out? You see stories of Robert Kubica, he's driving a Renault, blah, blah, blah. Does that affect you, or are you able to ignore it? How does that work?
Well, I'm off Twitter, to be honest. I gave it up for Lent, so it's I don't think it's a healthy place to be all the time. For me, I tried to not read the press. I think it's quite easy to when you're off Twitter and you obviously choose what you want to read. So I'm not fussed. I'm here to do a job. I'm focused on driving the car as quickly as I can do and racing well. So Austria was much better. I don't really care what anyone says. I'm focused on myself and doing the best job with my engineers and the team, and I'm sure it'll turn around. This time last year it was also a little bit tough, and we ended up stronger than Kev and kept the drive for this year. So I've got to remember that, and I'm sure when things come my way, then it'll be a very different story.
Jack mentioned Robert Kubica. Obviously, you're probably keeping across it as much as we are, but does that worry you, excite you? What are your emotions when you know that someone like Kubica is testing in a car that's in your team?
Well, I don't think it excites me. I think that would be a bit weird, but I don't mind. I'm happy for him. I was cheering him on when he was racing in Formula One. The unknown Polish guy that turned up and was really quick. So it was a real shame. I don't think I was ever even in GP2 when he was racing. So it's been a long time. So it's great that he's having a test again. And like I said, I don't know what's going on. I think it's good for him, but I'm focused on myself, and everyone can speculate how they like, but I'm just focused on doing what I need to do.
So when we come into the track, or when we go out for a meal after work, Andrew and Jack like to sit down and debate, thrash about these topics, and the rest of us can sometimes join in, but this one is more heated about Kubica. So you heard Jolyon Palmer there talking about his future, and it is intrinsically linked, isn't it, to Robert Kubica, who is trying to make this comeback, and if he is even partially successful, could well take Jolyon Palmer's seat, maybe even this season. Andrew, just tell us a little bit more about the politics of what it is, and then I'm going to let Jack rip into you because he loves that.
Well, Renault are being very cagey about it, and that in itself tells you quite a lot, that there's something serious going on. He had a test in Valencia last month, and they said, it's just a one-off for Robert, blah, blah, blah. And then suddenly he's having a second test. And this one's more serious. They've admitted this one's to establish whether he can make a comeback to Formula One. He spoke to the L'Équipe newspaper from France yesterday. They were the only people at the test. He told them, although he has these issues with his arm, his right arm was partially severed in the rally crash that he had in 2011, and that's ended his Formula One career basically, and he's not driven a circuit racing car in a race since. He said that his physical impairments do not affect his driving at the moment. Now, if that's true, he'll be in a Formula One car soon. It's inevitable because he's that good. There's no reason why he wouldn't be. So I think, this is me speculating now, I think what's going to happen next, he'll drive in the post-Hungary test after the Hungarian Grand Prix. There's a 2-day test there where all the teams in a 2017 car, he was kind of laughing about that, saying to the L'Équipe guy yesterday, is there a test in Hungary? Really? And I think if that test goes well, he'll be in the Renault. Now, that could happen at the Belgian Grand Prix. Nothing's set in stone yet. There's nothing definitive about that, but he was Hamilton-Alonso level Kubica, or Kubica as a Polish friend of mine tells me it should be pronounced. So why wouldn't they put him in the car if he's capable of being at that level again?
So it's a difficult one, because while I love seeing Robert Kubica come back, and everyone was a big fan of him, he got beaten by Nick Heidfeld in 2 of their 3 seasons together, so whether that puts you at Alonso Hamilton level, I'm not entirely sure. Why? He's 32 now. Why aren't you looking at younger drivers? There are young, exciting drivers coming through the ranks. You've already got Nico Hülkenberg, who is a very, very talented driver. I just don't quite see what they're trying to achieve by bringing Kubica back.
Well, because he's Hamilton or Alonso level. It's as simple as that.
We are going to continue this in practice, probably in the car, probably at dinner. Tom and I are just so lucky sometimes, aren't we? Right, predictions for this weekend. The British Grand Prix. No British winner in the singles at Wimbledon, but can we have a British winner here, or are you going to go for Sebastian Vettel again, Jack?
No, I'm afraid I'm going to have to go for Robert Kubica. He's going to take victory. I've got to go for Hamilton. 3 wins in a row here at Silverstone, and he's dominant around here.
Tom?
Same.
Andrew?
Has to be Hamilton. And let's just bear in mind, he's won 3 in a row so far, but this would be his 5th win at the British Grand Prix. That would equal the all-time record here for Alain Prost and Jim Clark. And I think he absolutely has to win. He's 20 points behind in the championship. He was depressed after Austria. If he doesn't win here, he's going to be properly depressed.
Oh dear, I shan't look forward to talking to him if that's the case. But thanks for lining that up for me beautifully. Jack, just very quickly, what's the key challenge to making it stick around here? What does Hamilton have to do?
The weather. I think that's going to be his biggest challenge this weekend, because you never know what can happen with the rain, and he's normally strong in the rain, and I don't think he'll be angry if it does come to shower, but he's just got to keep his head and make sure he has a good weekend and not be off the pace. I mean, I know that sounds obvious, but as we discussed earlier, 3 of the 9 races this year, he hasn't quite been on it.
Sports with Sean Caravilles.